Hello, hello, Meet Edgar community. We are so excited for today's webinar, and I am thrilled that you are here to join us. We, as usual, would love to know who's here. So right over here in the chat box, go ahead and introduce yourself. Let us know what industry you're in. If you see someone in a relevant industry, use this time to network and chat amongst each other. We love providing these situations for small business owners and solopreneurs to meet up as well. Today, we are going to be joined by Melissa here, who is going to give us an amazing webinar. So I am going to go ahead and pass it on over to her. I'll be in the chat the whole time. We'll go ahead and leave a little time at the end for questions. If you have a question that is not answered, go ahead and let us know by email, and we'll make sure we get you the answer at the end. But Melissa, go ahead and take it away.
Hi, everybody. I'm so excited to be here with you all today and to talk about a very important topic, which is how to make your business content as binge-worthy as a TV show. So let's go ahead and start diving in, get into all of this goodness. So in this webinar today, you're going to learn the secrets that I use to write compelling movie and TV scripts, and then how you can use those tricks to get people obsessing over your business content. And when I say business content, I mean like social media posts, newsletters, blogs, webinars, whatever you are doing to promote your business out there using content. You can use these tips and strategies. Okay. So what you're going to learn today is first the ripped from Hollywood plot lines that you can use right now in your business. Then we're going to talk about how to craft yourself as a compelling main character. Then we're going to talk about a wildly popular screenwriting structure that you can use to get people hooked on your every word. And spoiler alert for that, Meet Edgar actually uses this structure amazingly. So I'm going to give you an example on that. And then finally, how to create serialized content to make your business as obsession worthy as must-see TV. Okay. So before we dive in, I just want to give you a little bit about who I am. Some of you may know me because you've joined because I sent you the information, but I realize that I may be a stranger to some of you, so I want to give you a little bit of a rundown. As I was telling Megan before we started this presentation, I'm a bit of like a marketing and publicity fossil. And what I mean by that is I've been in business now for almost 15 years, in the marketing and publicity industry for almost 20 years. So woof, it has been a long time. Just to give you context, when I started out, we were still faxing things. So that just goes to show you how long I've been around. So I'm an award-winning publicity expert, content creator, and a professional screenwriter. I've only been a screenwriter for the past 5 years. So that's not something that I've been doing quite as long as marketing. However, I'm heavily steeped in that area right now. I'm the behind-the-scenes wordsmith for several New York Times bestselling authors and seven-figure course launches and multi-million-dollar brands. I also sell my own courses and have had plenty of multiple six-figure launches for those. So I definitely understand that space if you're here as a course creator. I've been featured in Variety, Fast Company, and named one of the top personal branding experts by Huffington Post. And then I'm the writer of the Obsession Trilogy, little wordplay from Lifetime Network. It was their first trilogy of movies. I've also written 2 other movies for that network, sold a television show that's in development, and I have 5 additional movies that I'm actually working on right now that will go into production in 2021. So there's a lot going on. And therefore, I drink way too much coffee. And I also hate the sun, which is kind of a fun fact about me. So I'm actually moving from Los Angeles, my home now, to Washington State in 2 weeks. So I will be surrounded by rain and really excited. All right. So let's start off by talking a little bit about why story is important for your business. So it's a scientific fact that human beings absolutely love story. And on a physiological level, our brains are wired to perk up and listen more intently, pay attention. We remember details more accurately when they are presented in the form of a story. And once you start weaving stories into your copy and your content, your communication will definitely go from bland to unforgettable. And the people in your audience will become even more obsessed with you and then more excited to buy from you. So if you think about story in the context of how we use it in everyday life outside of your business, when you tell a story to a friend, let's say about, a new restaurant that you found that you absolutely loved, it's more likely that that friend is going to remember that because you told them in the frame and context of a story. So if you said, oh my gosh, I got takeout from this amazing place. They packaged the food so beautifully. When I got it, it was hot and crispy and crunchy, just like I was sitting in the restaurant. You tell them this whole story that surrounds that and how you enjoyed it with your family, they will be more likely to remember that restaurant and more likely to repeat that restaurant to people they know, or just remember it the next time that they order takeout. Versus if you just said, hey, I like this restaurant, and don't give them any other details. Or if you were just to rattle off a bunch of details like, I like this restaurant, it was good, I ordered the chicken parmesan, right? That's not very memorable or repeatable. So I just wanted to give you that quick context of stories so that you can see we're doing it all the time, every day in our lives. And this is just about layering that on top of our business. Okay, so let's dive into some plot lines that you can use right away to start infusing more stories and captivating stories in your business. So when I say ripped from Hollywood plot lines, these are actual plot lines, and some of them you will probably recognize right away. They're used all the time here in Hollywood and what we use in all of our scripts. And you can actually use these exact things for your business in order to create content for your blog, your newsletter, your social media, wherever you're creating content in your business, you can use these. Okay. So the first one you will probably be incredibly familiar with. This is the overcoming the monster story. So this is a classic good versus evil story. Now, if you think about movies that you've watched, I mean, any superhero movie has this plot line, right? They're always trying to overcome the evil. It's the superhero and the villain. So this is where the main character or the hero sets out to destroy the monster or the villain in order to accomplish their goal, okay? So this works really well in a business context because most of us are trying to overcome something, right? We're trying to defeat our monster to achieve a goal or defeat a monster to achieve a goal. Now, a monster doesn't necessarily need to be a physical person, a supernatural being, or another company, right? Certainly in some contexts, we may be trying to overcome something, like if you are, for example, in the beauty industry and you make organic and non-toxic products, your monster might be other companies that are making products that are filled with chemicals and test on animals. Okay, so in that context, sure, your monster might be another company. But for service-based businesses, course-based businesses, consultants, coaches, etc., a lot of times the monster is whatever our audience is struggling with, right? And we're setting out to help them destroy that. Okay, so we're like their hero. So for example, my monster is when people absolutely hate their business and have like sucked all the fun out of every corner of what they do, okay? And I hate watching, people be so excited about something and then a year later, 2 years later, 5 years later, however long it takes, suddenly they're feeling drained and bored and burnt out and stressed by the very business they were so excited to create. So I'm trying to overcome that monster by helping people put the fun and pleasure back into their business. So that's, how I show up, why I show up every single day. Let's say you're somebody that, helps people with their health and wellness, and a huge monster for them is the need to, suppress emotions or deal with emotions by eating. Okay, so emotional eating. So that would be a monster that you are setting out to help people conquer, right? You're helping them conquer emotional eating. If you were a technology company offering software solutions, sort of like Meet Edgar does, right? They offer a really fun solution for people. So their monster is different, right? Their monster is people feeling completely overwhelmed by all of the social networks that are out there, posting something and then never being able to repurpose, reuse, and recycle that thing to create more memorable, captivating, and exciting content on the reg versus just sending it out once. So they're destroying that monster, right? That monster of being totally stressed and burnt out about content and not actually recycling and reusing the beautiful stuff that you create. So overcoming the monster, excellent story to tell. This can be something, again, that's like an overarching story that goes over your entire business, like something you might tell on a service page or work with me page, an about page, anything on your website that kind of lives and exists all the time, sort of like going to the library and looking at that book. And that's your story that always lives there. Or this is something you can tell constantly, right? Every week you can have things going out about what you're doing to destroy that monster. How are you showing up to overcome that monster? Okay. Next storyline is rags to riches. Now, this may or may not apply to you. Obviously, you will only use this if it does apply to you. But this is a popular storyline in that it's a Cinderella story. Okay, we're all familiar with Cinderella. It's a story of transformation where the main character is fighting to make something out of nothing, right? This is perfect for those of you who are here with us today who maybe started with nothing or very little and then rose to success despite the odds. Now, these odds don't necessarily need to be monetary odds. For some people, they could be, right? Perhaps you were in a precarious financial situation or employment situation, and then you rose from that struggle into the beautiful work and business or career that you have today. But for some of us, it could be maybe somebody that doubted us or a collective doubt that the outside world or even like internally we had. So an example of this that would work would be when I was young and in school, lots of people told me I would never be a writer. I was constantly told I was a terrible writer. That should not be a career path for me. I was told this by plenty of teachers and also college professors. Now, and then I started to believe that about myself as well, because these were people I was looking up to and respected their opinion. So in that case, right, I was able to then collectively overcome and rise above that, not just their opinions of me, but my own opinion of myself, and go on to become not only a writer in business contexts, but a professional screenwriter, which is one of the most challenging and difficult industries to break into. So that is a way of rising from nothing or very little, right? And rising to success despite those odds. Okay. The next plot line that you can use, and this is probably relevant to every single person here, is a quest. Okay. We're all on a quest to do something, whether with our business or whether personally or some combination of both. We want to be successful. We want to disrupt a system. We want to do good in the world. We want to make people feel safe and happy and comforted, feel joy, all these wonderful things that we do. Quest stories are excellent to tell because they give customers a sense of hope, right? And these are always a really excellent story to tell because you can always come up with something about what you're on a quest to do. And it's probably lots of little quests to achieve something great, okay? So for example, you are on a quest. We'll use that example from earlier. You help people with their eating and nutrition and overall health, and you're on that quest to help people feel their most like vibrant and energized and healthiest self. Okay, so that means that you probably have to go on a lot of different mini quests in order to make that happen. That could be a bunch of different things, right? That could mean things you're doing in your own life in order to role model this for people. That's like showing up every day on your social media, showing people behind the scenes of like your workouts, your routines, just how you move through your everyday. And that way people can see that and model their behavior after yours. It's also, talking about the things that you believe in and talking about constantly so that they get this message sinking in, the quest that you're on and the things you're doing on that quest. So what do you want a quest to do? Well, I'm on a quest, as always, to help people become the most energized and healthiest self. Okay. You can even frame it as, in 2021, I want to reach as many people as possible to become their healthiest and most energized self. Here's one way I'm doing that, right? And every single week you can show up and kind of update them on your quest. So I love this storytelling structure because it works so well as something that you can use every single week in your business. And there's not one person here that this wouldn't be relevant for. Okay, so next we have comedy. Now this is one of those that may not work for every single business, and that's okay. But for those of you who do love to inject humor into your business, comedy is an excellent way to help people perk up and pay attention. Now, comedy does not mean that you have to be a stand-up comedian. So let me just put that out there right now. This is not about, you have to go take stand-up classes or suddenly you have to be a joke writer. Not at all. This is really just for people, like I said, who have a bit of a flair for humor. Again, this should feel very natural and authentic for you. The way that we should feel about you when we encounter you in a business context should be the same way that we feel about you when we encounter you in your personal life, right? So if I'm sitting down to have coffee with you, not in a business context, we're just two friends having coffee, what would the tone and vibe of that coffee be, right? Are you someone that likes to crack a joke here and there, just likes to make things really fun and silly and playful? If that's the case, then you may want to start bringing more of that into your business and into your storytelling, because it does give it a very captivating quality, okay? And also, using humor in your brand means that you are in on the joke. It humanizes your work into something very fun, right? It gives it that feeling of a customer wanting to like pull up and have a beer with you. And if that's the vibe and tone of your business, or if that's the vibe and tone of who you are as a person, you may want to think about putting more of that into your business. It's a great way to feel. It's a great way to welcome in customers that are ideal for you by infusing more comedy. And as far as being in on the joke, I believe it was, I don't remember if it was Pizza Hut or Domino's. I actually think it was Domino's Pizza. They're often considered or sort of widely panned as like, our pizza isn't great. It's like the pizza you get at 3 a.m. when there's no other options. Very much went in on the joke by creating a whole campaign a few years back where you could take a picture of the pizza and upload it into this forum they had created and give them feedback as to like what they didn't like. So it was basically welcoming in people to like roast their pizza, right? Do like a comedy roast of their pizza. And they got, thousands, probably tens of thousands of entries, people talking about how bad the sauce and the cheese and the bread, and just basically everything they could possibly make fun of about their pizza was going straight to the company. And then the way that they created this into a comedic hit for them is they took all that feedback and then they revised their recipe using all of that feedback. So they used it as like a beautiful, feedback loop with their audience. And then essentially just showed everybody, hey, we were in on the joke. Like, we're happy to listen. We're happy to be roasted. And like, here's how we're making it better. So I thought that was just a brilliant way for a global brand to do something like this, and an excellent way that we can start turning our wheels in business of how that might work out for us as well. Okay. And then finally, another storyline that could work really well for you is the rebirth storyline. So this is a story of starting over. Rebirth stories are very, very inspiring. You may already be thinking of some that you've read in other contexts. And it should pretty much be relevant to every single person here. So the way that you can use this plot line is talk about a time when you had to scrap a project and start over. I think as entrepreneurs, pretty much all of us had to do this at some point. Think about a time where you had to, learn a new skill and found yourself at square one. One of my most popular pieces of content was a piece about, it was called How to Be a Beginner Again. And it was all about me going to this fitness boot camp class that that in the beginning, it was like led by this former Marine. And in the beginning, he said, I only want you to do 60% capacity in this class because it's your first time and it's better to ease yourself in. Well, at the time, I was like type A perfectionist type of person. And so I did not listen to him. And I pushed 100%. And then at the very end of the class, when they get into their like trust circle and everyone like puts their arms around each other and is supposed to like congratulate a job well done, I had to like rush out of the trust circle of 30 people and vomit into a trash can behind them because I didn't listen. So it was this very like humbling experience going to this. And it was a great story to tell because, I had to learn to pay attention, not get caught up in this like type A thing that I was at the time trying to work on anyway. And I was a square one in the class, and that's okay. It's okay to be a beginner. It's okay when everyone else is better than you. That's actually a good thing. We want to surround ourselves by people that are better than us so that we strive to get better as well. So this is a particularly inspiring plot line to use if you are seen as a very highly accomplished or like successful, intimidating person. And you'll know that if people say that to you a lot, if they say everything seems really perfect for you or you seem to be killing it out there. If you're hearing a lot of that type of feedback from people, then I recommend using this plot line a bit more often. It helps you to kind of sink a little bit down to their level so that they understand that you were once in their shoes, or perhaps you're doing things in other areas of your life that are putting you in their shoes, right? So just because you're great at whatever you sell or do or however you serve doesn't mean that you don't have issues in other areas. And it doesn't mean that all of the struggles and roller coaster are erased just because you have some success, right? So this can be a great way to create that connection loop with people so that they feel like, okay, this is the person I want to learn from or the person I want to work from or buy from, because they actually understand what I'm going through and how I feel, and they have been there or they're there now in some other context. All right. So now that we have some plot lines to use, let's talk a little bit about crafting yourself as a compelling main character. Okay, so this is all about building your hero's journey. Now, the hero's journey is essentially an origin story that you can use over and over and over again in your business, on your about page, on your social media, in your sales presentations, your webinars, essentially any place that you have to like talk about yourself, which is lots of different places. Hero's journey you're probably familiar with from if you've ever watched a superhero movie, like, all of Wonder Woman #1 was a hero's journey. So it was like where she came from and her rise to becoming Wonder Woman. So that's essentially what we're looking at is like, what is your Wonder Woman journey? All right. So when you are telling this story, there are some steps that you need to take. Now, I'm completely open to how you want to structure the story in the sense of like, I don't think there's any specific template you need to follow. Templates are usually the death of all creative writing anyway. But these are just some things to get you brainstorming and thinking so that as you start to put together this kind of overall hero's journey story for yourself so that you can use bits and pieces or the whole thing in your marketing and communications, that you have a flow, okay? But also don't feel like this is some rigid template that you need to work within because you don't. All right, so the first thing that you want to talk about is how it all got started, okay? So whenever you're opening a story where you're talking about yourself, it's really important that you give a little peek into how your business got started, right? Was it born out of a surprising conversation? Did the idea come to you in a dream? Did it all begin, with this like DIY blog that you created and your laptop, and then that's it? Talking a little bit about the early days, even if it's in like one sentence, is very powerful so that your audience knows how this all came together. Okay, so they're not like, oh, you just stepped out of the womb and we're really perfect at this. No, no, no. We want them to know that this was an arc and a journey for you. Okay. So some people like to dive in a little bit deeper. I have clients, particularly those that help people with, I would say, like more sensitive subjects or things that are harder to tackle or deal with, where they'll share a little bit more about their early stages. For example, if it was someone that helps people with relationships, they might open by talking about a relationship gone wrong for them, or maybe that they were trapped in this like cyclone of bad relationships, and it wasn't until they found something or tried something or did several years of therapy or whatever it was in order to get to that other side. So oftentimes they will, embellish that a little bit so that it feels more connected for their audience. And for some people, it could be like it says right here, it could be there was a surprising conversation. For example, let's say you were someone that always worked in the corporate realm and kind of never thought about leaving. It was like, this is what I do for a living, and I don't have a dream of entrepreneurship. But then you had a surprising conversation with a colleague that gave you that light bulb moment of, wow, this is something that's needed. And hey, maybe this is something I can do, right? And that would be enough. You wouldn't need to share like this deep, long description. It would just say, I worked in the corporate sector, and that was how I thought my path was carved until I had this one conversation with a colleague over, vanilla lattes one day. And this person said XYZ, and that made the light bulb moment, okay? So the point here is that you don't want to skip how this got started, because that's very important for your audience. They need to know. Okay. So the next part, again, in this loose structure that we're outlining here, is talking about obstacles, okay? And we talked a lot about this in the plot lines as well, but people love hearing stories about those who beat the odds or achieved success despite obstacles. So the point I want to make here is that whenever you're sharing stories about yourself, I don't want you to hide your big mistakes or your rock bottom moments. Share these things with your audience. You should be sharing them regularly. If you had launches that flopped, if you made a wrong turn, if you're getting rejected, if you botched some piece of your marketing, right? Whatever fumbles brought you here today, these are really powerful to share with your audience, because again, it humanizes you and humanizes your brand. And it also delivers that big adrenaline shot to your audience when they hear this. They know that they're not alone, and it's an exciting story to read. Any movie or television show that flops, it always comes down to conflict. It always comes down to they haven't done a good job with setting up like the motivations of the characters and the conflict. And when there's no conflict, people just check out. It's so boring. So there has to be constant conflict for people to actually tune in. And it's the same thing with your business, because we have so many other distractions. So I highly recommend sharing and being open about things. I don't mean you have to share every skeleton in your closet. That's not it at all. This is about what you feel comfortable sharing. But these can be very powerful things to share. So don't skip these moments. Don't skip the conflict or the obstacles. I'll give you an example, an overarching story, my hero's journey that I share when it comes to my writing career is that whenever I have a new script to take out, or right now I'm taking a novel out, I can usually expect that I will get at least 100 no's. And it's become sort of an equation for me so that I know, okay, I need to pitch 100 people, hear 100 no's before I even start to get into the realm of getting a yes. And so I share this all the time because it's very important for people to hear that, especially if people have not flexed their rejection muscle. And a lot of people, will get a rejection once or twice and they say, oh, I'm no good. I give up, right? And I don't want people to do that. I think that we should be celebrating our failures and accepting them as a part of the journey versus trying to hide them or sidestep them, because then we definitely aren't going after what we want. So don't share your big mistakes or rock bottom moments or your fails or your flops. All of those things make for powerful storytelling. And then finally, you can get into your triumphs. Yay! And why that's step 3 here is because often we just skip to this. Like most of the time when we tell stories about ourselves, we just skip kind of right to the triumphs, usually stacking kind of impressive credentials or whatever, right? Rather than digging into some of these other pieces. So I would say share everything else first, and then you can start moving into your triumphs. Triumphs are obviously credentials you have, media appearances you've done, revenue successes, whatever you consider a triumph, right? Also, triumphs can be client success stories, right? Illustrating how you've helped them transform. Particularly if you don't feel comfortable celebrating yourself, I think we all should. But if it's something that feels a little sticky for you right now, you can always lean on your clients' words. You can say, here's what a few clients have said about me. And that does a wonderful thing for your audience because they like to see what your clients have to say. And sharing client stories, always reinforces that you're awesome at what you do. It proves that you're helping to get people actual results. And also your clients feel special when they're being spotlighted as well, right? Which then translate into that fandom and that revenue that you are seeking. So the point here is that anytime you're telling stories about yourselves, don't skip the conflict, don't skip the beginning, don't just skip to the end, right? We need all the good stuff in the beginning, and you can watch any TV show or any movie to see that is the trajectory. We don't just see the happy ending, we see all of the stuff that comes before that so that we earn that happy ending. Your audience needs to see that whatever your current happy ending is, that you have earned it, right? It has been a journey for you so that they don't just think you're up on this pedestal and someone they can't access. They want to see themselves in you. All right. So now let's get into a screenwriting structure that will help to hook people on your every word. And as I gave you a spoiler alert, Meet Edgar did this so well. We're going to talk exactly about how they did it. But again, this is a very loose structure. This is not something rigid or a template of any sorts. This is just something to keep in mind whenever you are structuring content for your business. All right, so what it is it's the 3-act structure. Okay, so the 3-act structure is a screenwriting model that divides stories into 3 parts: Act 1, Act 2, and Act 3. Really, it's just beginning, middle, and end. So you can leave this webinar today and completely forget that I said Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, and just remember I need to have a beginning, middle, and end to things. And that might be an easier way for you to soak it in, okay? And it may seem basic. You may think I know that, okay? But I can't tell you how many Instagram stories I watch that have no end. Usually they're just like a series of things and then they have no closure, and you end up feeling like you just watched a series of television. You're like, well, what the heck happened at the end? And then they cancel the show, right? And then you never know. So we don't want our audience walking away feeling that way. All right. So Act 1, this is the beginning of your story. Beginning of whatever piece of content you're putting out there, okay? You need to tell people how to feel. You need to know how you want them to feel, okay? This is how you hook them in and get them invested in whatever you are sharing. So this is about what tone you want to set. Think about any TV show, any movie, okay? Each one has its own tone. So a show like Breaking Bad, right, has this really ominous tone. A show like Emily in Paris on Netflix has this really like light and airy and fun and whimsical tone. So think about What is the tone you're putting in here, right? How do you want people to feel when they digest this piece of content that you're putting out? And it doesn't have to be the same every time, by the way. You don't have to have the same exact feeling with every piece of content. So if you wanted your reader to feel curious, you could begin with a question. Did you know that XYZ, right? Did you know that 90% of people turn to the fridge when they feel sad? Okay. Whatever. That would be a did you know question. If you want your reader to feel inspired, then you could begin maybe with like a motivational quote or a song lyric. That can be a fun way to just automatically let them know that, okay, this piece is going to be very inspiring and motivational for me. If you want your reader to feel shaken awake, then maybe you begin with some startling statistic that would grip their attention. Or maybe just something that you have uncovered where, you come in and this, let's say you're doing a series of Instagram stories, for example, you might come on and say, I cannot believe what I learned today. And then tell them whatever you learned, right? But it has that tone of like, wow, like I really better, get it together because of what so-and-so just told me. So you just need to nail the opening, the beginning of your content by making sure that people know how to feel. All right. So you set the tone for them. Okay. The middle of your content, so the middle section, should be, what do you want people to know? Okay. And this is where you present some kind of conflict or obstacle to them. So, for example, let's say that you're sharing a story about in a blog post or a newsletter that talks about like your rise to success, or if you work for a company and there's a different founder, your founder's rise to success. So again, like we talked about earlier, when we do quests or just overall, when you're talking about a hero's journey, you need to share a low moment or several low moments. Okay. There has to be conflict and obstacle in that. If you're sharing an educational piece of content, so for example, a lot of people like to do how-to content or like tip-based content. Instead of just saying, here's 3 ways how you can do X, Y, Z, well, you want to also talk about the ways that people often use but fail. So create some conflict within that. So even if you're giving them, 3 ways that they can succeed, be sure in each of those 3 ways, you're talking about how they're doing it wrong or how many people do it wrong. Okay. So I might say something, let's say I'm giving people tips around, I want to teach them how they can get more captivated audiences. Okay. That's my topic. And I'm going to give them 3 ways to do that. And it would be easy for me to just list out 3 ways, but then that's very boring and most people are just going to check out. But instead, if I make those 3 ways into some conflict, so I might say, way number 1 is that people can, keep their eyes on their own paper. Okay. And then what I would say there is that most people, when they're looking for inspiration for content, will start to look everywhere else. It's like being the kid in elementary school where you're like peeking over at everybody else's paper, trying to see what they're answering on their test, and then getting inspired from that for your own content. But that is the quickest way to have a complete flop because everyone cares about different things. Everyone does things differently. And if you're just copying off of somebody, then it's definitely going to be mediocre. So instead, keep your eyes on your own paper and do X, Y, Z. Okay, so instead of just saying, keep your eyes on your own paper and do this, I'm actually outlining the conflict, right? I'm putting a lot of visceral information in there so that people can see themselves and go, oh yeah, I've done that. Maybe I'm doing that right now. Okay, so you just want to make sure that you include conflict in there. Like you definitely want people to know something with this piece of content that you're putting out, but make sure that there's conflict within it. Okay, and then finally, just what do you want people to take away, right? Resolving the story. That could be imparting an important lesson or an important action step. It's just very important to have a clear ending and takeaway. Otherwise, your audience is left with an unsatisfied feeling of like, what's missing? What am I missing? And like I said earlier, this happens a lot in Instagram stories because many times they're not planned. So you might just kind of like start to post them or go live, and you're talking about something in a talking head, or maybe you put a series of text-based stories, but then there's not like an ending. So just make sure whenever you go live on Instagram or anywhere else that you're doing content, that you have some clear ending, right? It can be as simple as saying, this is what I want you to know from this. This is what I want you to take away. This is the lesson I want you to hear. This is an action step I want you to take. Just have some way to close the loop, and then you can even write the end. That's fine. Totally up to you. But just make sure that it's an ending and that you've given that to your audience so that they don't feel unsatisfied. All right. Now let's talk a little bit about Meet Edgar's example, because I think they did this so well. So yay, Meet Edgar. So a great example of this that you can see live is there's an article on the Meet Edgar website called a simple guide on how to use hashtags. So you can just look that up. And they open the article with this line. It says, remember when hashtags weren't a thing and the hashtag symbol was only known as the number sign? Okay, so I love that because they open the article by telling people that they should feel curious. And they also infused a little bit of humor they had a GIF there. I think it was from Schitt's Creek. And I think it was Eugene Levy from Schitt's Creek who was like, what's a hashtag? It was really cute. So it had this comedic element to it. It set the tone. And then people should feel curious because they are hearkening back to a time when there were no hashtags. Okay. And then in the middle, they introduced the conflict and told people what they needed to know in the advice. So too many people use hashtags incorrectly, and that can hurt their content. It's super frustrating to think you're following best practices, but only to see zero results for your effort. So we're going to spare you that pain and wasted time. So I love that they, have the conflict right here about how a lot of people use them incorrectly and it hurts their content. And then as they're giving their best practices, they are really educating and putting that in. So we're feeling the conflict, but we're also getting really excellent advice throughout. And then finally, what they want you to take away in this lesson is to tell you how to use hashtags. So they have this little section, this TLDR, which means too long, didn't read. The long story short on hashtags is that you should be using them in your content, but how you use them will depend on the platform and your industry. Follow best practices per platform and remember to engage. Use hashtags as an engagement tool to find other similar accounts and to join in conversations. So I love that really nice wrap up to all of this so that we know that what they're asking us to do is to follow the best practices that they've laid out. Okay. And they're just wrapping that up in a nice little bow for us rather than just leaving us off on their fifth best practice or however many were in there. And then we're just like, okay, all right, is that it? Right? Did it end? So it's just this nice little bow that they've wrapped around it. So I thought that was such an excellent example. If you are looking for guidance and support on how to structure your own, I think this is a good time when you can look at somebody else's paper, but only for the express purpose of just seeing how they outlined it, because they did an excellent job. All right, so the 3-act structure recap again. The beginning of your piece should be what do you want them to feel? The middle is what do you want them to know? And then the end is what do you want them to take away? Okay, so this is just a simple recap structure that you can use whenever you are outlining a piece of content. You can just sit down, you can write these 3 things, and then underneath each thing, you can answer the question, and that will help you to keep on task and on target as you are creating a piece of content so that you're not dipping off into 27 different directions if that's something that you feel you tend to do. Okay, finally, let's talk about how to create serialized content. This is a really fun and very simple concept to use in your business. So what do I mean when I say serialized content? So serialized storytelling, very common in television. It's a mechanism where stories are told in order to get people to come back for more. Okay. It's one story told over a number of episodes, just like Game of Thrones, right? That's a great example. Certainly there are some shows that are not serialized. For example, like Law and Order. You show up for Law and Order, they solve the crime by the end of the episode, and then you can leave and you're done. And you can bop back into that show whenever you want to. So that's called episodic, which means that it's a closed loop on each episode. But serialized is when, it's one story over multiple episodes. If you try to join Game of Thrones in like season 2, episode 7, you're going to be like, what's going on? Who are White Walkers? I don't get it. Who is this Khaleesi chick, right? You're going to be confused. So when you start to mimic serialized storytelling in your content creation, it triggers this psychological need within people to pay closer attention to your content. It creates that binge-worthy feeling. So that's why it's so exciting, because if you are reaching people who watch TV, and I would say it's probably pretty rare that you have someone in your audience who has never watched a serialized television show in their life, then their brain remembers that, right? We are wired and triggered to remember that. So here are some examples of how you can use serialized storytelling in your content. So this could be if you have a particularly meaty or long piece of content, like an article that you've written, a video you've created, or perhaps a very long podcast episode. One way that you can make it more binge-worthy is by splitting it into multiple parts and then have cliffhangers at the end of each part. Okay, so you could say, let's say you are doing a piece of content on, we'll use this example again, on like emotional eating, right? Big, meaty topic, lots of things you can say. So maybe you split that into a six-parter emotional eating content piece, right? And at the end of each piece, you would say, coming next week, or stay tuned for XYZ. So you're giving them like a little teaser on what's to come next week. And then you can recap the previous week, right? Or if you're doing it daily, right, it would be like, tomorrow I'm going to talk about this. And then you're recapping what you did the day before. So there's no rules as to how often you drip this out. It just is the matter of, if you have something particularly meaty, sometimes it can make sense to drip it out in multiple parts versus one big long chunk. Okay. Another thing you can do is tell a portion of a story over Instagram stories, Instagram Live, or Facebook Live with a coming soon cliffhanger. So they need to come back and discover the next installment. So let's say there's a topic that you're excited to talk about on Instagram, for example. Instead of sitting down for 30 minutes and talking about the entire topic, maybe you just give them half of the information. And then you say, if you want more, come back and join me tomorrow, and I'm going to talk about this, this, and this, right? So you're getting people coming back. They're excited to come back. They want more. They're yearning for more. You're creating that serialized element. Another thing you could do, which I've seen some clients do in the past, is let's say, again, you have a very long post you want to do on Instagram, like in a caption. And we all know that like captions are so hard because it all just gets stuffed in that thing, and how people are scrolling so fast, and very few people nowadays are actually stopping their scroll and reading it all. So instead, why don't you split that long caption into 3 individual parts, and then you can have 3 photos or images that accompany those. And that way, now you've taken care of 3 posts in your Instagram feed instead of like one long meaty post. And then finally, my favorite way to use this serialized storytelling is to share your entire hero's journey. So this would be like your entire business story up until this date, something that's way too long to go on like an about page, because it would be like their eyeballs would be glazing over. It's something that when you want to give them a little bit more information, right, like really diving in a bit deeper into your journey, and give them more points, more conflict, etc. You could do this in a serialized way. So I did this with my business story, which, as I told you earlier, I've been around forever. So I have a really long business story, obviously. And while I didn't include every single moment, of course, doing it in a 6-part series really helped me to put more of my story and more of the conflict I experienced in that piece to make it really riveting. So you can think of it like your own mini series. It's like someone's shooting a docu-series about you, and break up your story over multiple installments. I called mine The Scandalous Truth because I like having that feeling of like an true Hollywood story. Obviously, you'll name yours something different, but it's a fun way to get out your business story. And a lot of people are curious how you went from A to wherever you are now. All right. So let's go ahead and wrap it up, and then I'll hop into the question box. So to recap what you've learned today, we talked about plot lines you can use right now in your business. So I'm excited for you all to go out and start trying that. Then we talked about crafting yourself as a compelling main character. So when you think about your hero's journey, you can go into that. You can talk about a wildly popular screenwriting structure you can use to get people hooked on your every word. So obviously, that's just the 3-act structure, beginning, middle, and end that we went through. Easy thing to line out for yourself anytime you are creating a new piece of content. And then finally, how to create serialized content, which is my favorite thing to do in my business. All right. So what is next? Well, besides answering questions, if you are interested in checking my work out, you can simply just come to my website. That's the best way to come and connect with me. It's just my name, melissacassera.com. And if you're interested in reading my business story, you can find that on my website as well. And I have lots of good stuff in my About page too. So you can pop on over there and take a peek. All right, so let me jump into the question box and see if there are things I haven't answered yet. So the first question is from Michael, and Michael says, is it advisable to have multiple conflicts in which a small conflict is overcome, then a larger one, and so forth until the major conflict is overcome? Yes, absolutely, because I imagine that whatever you are on a quest to do, or whatever monster you are trying to overcome, is probably a pretty big one. And in many of our businesses, we have not completely overcome it, which is why we're still in business, right? We're still trying to fight down whatever that monster is. So yes, along the way, you will probably have like smaller solutions that you have developed, or like you said, tackled smaller conflicts. And you can talk about those in individual pieces of content. And then you still have kind of like this big monster. So just the reason why we're still having Avengers movies is because there's always still a monster there. And it's the same thing in your business. The reason why it still goes on is because there's still some monster that exists. For example, using the emotional eating, one that we used, it's like, well, that doesn't just go away. It's not like poof and no one has that issue. Of course, there's always going to be people that have that issue, which then keeps the person in business who is helping people with that, right? They were helping new people all the time. All right. David says, where can we find Scandalous Truth? So that'll be on my website, David. And then Miles says, which is better as a mini series, synchronous or asynchronous media, i.e. webinar series, webinar series versus series of emails? I mean, a webinar series, I guess you could do. I think that would be completely fine. There really is no modality that's better than one or the other. You can do a series of emails, you could do a series of videos, you could do a series of webinars, podcast episodes, a series of Instagram stories or Instagram lives. The answer lies in what you like doing. So if you find no pleasure in that medium, then do not do it. So for example, if you absolutely hate writing, but you love being on video, please do not sit down and write because it doesn't make sense. You might as well just do and lean into what feels really pleasurable for you and show up in that way versus trying to stuff or siphon yourself into some type of medium that doesn't feel good. So it really boils down to however you want to tell the story and what feels better. So if it's I would so much rather show up and do 4 webinars versus doing an email of 4 or a series of 4 emails, great, do the webinars, whatever feels better for you. All right. Sherry says, does this work well for professional service providers such as lawyers and dentists, etc.? Yes, any of these tips can work for that. Obviously, you just have to work within the regulations that are set up in your industry. So obviously, the legal industry, the medical industry, and the financial industry have certain circumstances and things that they can and cannot say. So you would just have to be mindful of those things. And if you work in that industry, obviously, you know what they are. I know I have a lot of people in the financial sector, and they usually have to run them by compliance and make sure that they can put it out. I imagine it's probably similar in the legal sector. I've worked in the medical sector as well, and I know that there is a lot of HIPAA information and things like that you have to be careful of. But again, whoever your compliance officer is, or whoever you work with in that capacity, you just want to make sure that you run by whatever content you're going to put out, make sure that it hits all regulations. But the structure of these things you can certainly use. All right. Brandy says, I'm in social media, so I'm writing shorter content. Any tips for incorporating these shorter writing like social media? Yes. So you can use all of these in shorter writing. You can still use the 3-act structure, even if it's a paragraph long, right? You need to have a beginning where you set the tone. You need to have a middle that has some conflict, and then you just need to close it and make sure that they're clear that there's an ending and a takeaway, right? So I could say, if I'm talking about keeping your eyes on your own paper, I could say, I want to shake people awake and say, did you know the worst thing that you can do for your content is looking at what somebody else does? So I'm shaking them awake. And then I would say, just like when we're in elementary school, you look at somebody else's paper and then you get caught by the teacher and everything's shut down. In business, if you look at somebody else's paper, you may not get caught, but you may accidentally get inspired and copy when you don't intend to. So the best thing to do is keep your eyes on your own paper next time you sit down to create a piece of content, right? 1 paragraph, I had a beginning, middle, and end. I accomplished everything that needed to be accomplished in the 3-act structure. So you can absolutely use all of these tips. And if you prefer shorter content too, Brandy, maybe you want to start thinking about, like, are there series of things that you can do that fall under the same theme or the same trend? So if you write about a topic multiple times, why not turn it into a series? Here's my 6-part series on XYZ, okay? And then you make 6 social media posts that all fall under that one theme. And then at the end of each one, you say, like, next time I post, you will discover this. Okay, so giving them like a little bit of a cliffhanger, what to expect. All right. Justine says, what's the monster for a percussion ensemble? Well, it's a little hard to tell, Justine, because I don't know how you're serving people. I imagine if it's a monster for musicians, it could be overcoming your own internal monster, like creativity. So that could be it. But otherwise, I'm not sure. I would have to have a lot more context as to what your business is, who you're serving with your business, et cetera, et cetera. So it would take me a little bit to look into that. But yeah, so I don't have an immediate answer for that because I don't have all the information. All right. Karen says, did you feel you needed to be in LA to become a screenwriter? At first, yes, I did. And now things have shifted, both in my screenwriting work and just in how the world operates around me. Obviously, we're in a pandemic and we're in another shutdown here in Los Angeles. So things have shifted. So when I first got into screenwriting, it was definitely important to get out and network. I mean, this is just as much about having talent as it is having relationships, much like business. So it was good to be here, to be able to meet people around town and have coffee and see people face to face. And so that was really great. And there's a lot of fun events here. Now I'm in a place where I have a lot of contracted deals. I have projects for the next couple of years, even through 2023. So at this point, I can be a little bit more flexible in where I live, and we do all of our development work now, on Zoom, so that helps. And filming really doesn't happen much in LA anymore, not for the projects that I do anyway. Most filming now happens in Canada or Atlanta or other places. So as far as needing to be on set, if that is the case, this is not really the place that you would need to be anymore. So I am super excited because I never really wanted to live in LA. It was just really, it was career focused, I'll say. And Washington has been my dream for a while. So I'm so excited to move there and just move on with projects and live somewhere that I love. All right. Time for a couple more questions. So Dee said, can you give an example for creating a mini series content for an alcohol brand? So it kind of depends, again, on the context here, Dee. So I don't know what your brand is, what the tone is, what the story is. An easy one would just be what I outlined in the presentation, which is telling your founder's story. So how it came about, what made them come up with this particular alcohol, right? That's always really fun, just kind of putting a human face on this. So I think that would be my answer for now, just because I don't know tonally what the brand is. I don't know the customers and have some of the deeper information. I would also say, excuse me, maybe, again, it's hard to tell because I don't have the information, but perhaps if this is an alcohol that you mix in some way, you could do a series around the best ways to mix this. So mixing it up. And maybe it could be a variety of recipes. Maybe you bring in guest bartenders and make it really fun, video content, or it could even be, written content too. But just there's some ideas for you as with the little information that I have. All right. Catherine says, I help artists, but I'm tired of talking about the starving artists cliche. Do you have suggestions on how to talk about their pain differently, but still connect with them? Well, I think part of this, I totally get what you're saying. I think part of this is tonally how you handle your content, Catherine. And I have a few clients that do this very well, where instead of kind of leaning into the struggles, they address the struggles, but all from a very positive space. I do this a little bit myself, where I like to lean into the fun and pleasure of things versus really getting mired in in everything that sucks. So I think on one hand, you do want to be aware of the pain and struggles they're going through. And you want to make sure that they know you're aware of it. So if you're just showing up and saying, we're not poor, we're not this, we're this, sometimes that can come off like being a bit out of touch, simply because then they might think you don't understand their plight at all, right? So maybe the way that you frame it is, I understand that it can be a struggle sometimes as an artist, but the struggle comes often from within. And there are definitely ways that we can, work our mindset or distract ourselves or get involved with things that boost our creativity so that we're not sinking into this hole of a starving artist and becoming rich in multiple areas of our life, right? So it's not about just monetary riches, but feeling rich in the sense of you're a wealth of creativity, you're a wealth of positivity, you're a wealth of energy. So maybe that's the angle that you take, is helping them feel rich in certain ways, so that we don't have to keep clawing back to this this cliche. Or maybe your movement is there is no starving artist cliche. It doesn't exist. Okay. And then the monster you're trying to take down is the cliche. And then that's the tone that you want to evoke. All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining me. I so appreciate it, and for all of your wonderful questions. I appreciate everyone that chimed in and asked. And I don't know if Megan pops back on or if we just end, but I just want to say one more time that I appreciate all of your time today and hopping on with me. And I hope that you've learned some good stuff and you're ready to go out and create some TV binge-worthy content.
time today, guys. I will send out the replay by the end of the day today. If you have any other questions, or if you would like to use any of these tips in a social media scheduling tool and you have questions about that, email support@meetedgar.com and I will be in the inbox the rest of the afternoon. Melissa, thanks so much again.
Thank you.